Good afternoon or good evening, depending where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Thursday, December the 9th, 2021. And let's start with some breaking news. This is from Don Babwin and Sarah Burnett, Associated Press. Former Empire actor Jussie Smollett was convicted Thursday on 506 charges. He staged an anti-gay racist attack on himself nearly 3 years ago and then lied to Chicago police about it. He was acquitted on one count. The verdict came after a roughly 1-week trial in which two brothers testified that Smollett recruited them to fake an attack on him near his home in downtown Chicago in January 2019. Smollett repeatedly denied the claims. The brothers said Smollett orchestrated the hoax, telling them to put a noose around his neck and rough him up in view of a surveillance camera, and that he wanted video of the hoax made public via social media. Smollett called the brothers liars and said their account was 100% false. He testified over 2 days about being the victim of what he said was a hate crime, telling the jury there was no hoax. Abimbola Osundairo, who worked with Smollett on the Chicago set of Empire, and his brother Olabingo Osundairo, also testified that Smollett paid them $3,500 for faking the attack. Smollett said the money was for meal and workout plans that Abimbola Osundairo was providing so the actor could be more toned for upcoming performances. The January 29th assault was reported to police, prompting a massive investigation that a lead detective said included some 24 officers and 3,000 staff hours. The investigation, which included video from surveillance cameras, GPS, and taxi and rideshare records, led police to the Osundairo brothers, who told detectives Smollett had staged the alleged hate crime. Smollett's defense attorneys argued that the brothers attacked the actor, who is gay and black, because they were homophobic and didn't like who he was. They also alleged the brothers made up the story about the attack being staged to get money from Smollett, and that they told him they wouldn't testify against him if he paid them each $1 million. The Class 4 felony carries a prison sentence of up to 3 years, so that would be 15 in total. But experts have said Smollett would likely be placed on probation in order to perform community service. Does that seem just to any of you? Why did he do this? Perhaps despite his role in Empire, he didn't think that his career was moving as fast as it should be. That's one possible explanation. Another one is that he simply wanted to foment racial hatred, which he did. This unbelievable story was picked up by all the usual suspects, including Kamala Harris, who called it a modern-day lynching. Oh, yes, yet more evidence of the nightmarish world that Black Americans live in. Steve Saylor wrote at the time body cam footage of Jussie Smollett with noose around his neck. A body cam video of Chicago Police Department officers entering Jussie Smollett's apartment the night attack was reported. He still has rope around his neck, because that's the sort of thing someone would do. Someone beats you up, throws a chemical irritant in your face, puts a noose around your neck, and yeah, I don't know, maybe this looks good on me, so I'll just keep wearing it. A sailor asked, how soon until it becomes the conventional wisdom that police body cameras are racist? Comments from Twitter. He's an actor, not a writer. And action in 3, 2, 1. Under his sweater. Doesn't make sense. The rope was routed clear underneath his hoodie. CBS Chicago reporter Charlie DeMar is tweeting out wonderful real video of the Jussie Smollett hate hoax. It's like that Taiwanese network that concocts computer animation videos of events in the news, like Tiger Woods being attacked with a golf club by Mrs. Woods, except it's real. DeMar had tweeted, I tracked down surveillance of the Osundairos buying supplies before attack. Sources say Jussie Smollett told brothers what to buy. Countless phone calls placed for this, visited more stores than I wish to admit. Comments from Twitter. They probably shouldn't have said, here's a bunch of stuff we're buying. Not for a hoax or anything, just some stuff we wanted. Not for us, it's for a friend. Once again, local reporters are running circles around the cable news people. All the best reporting in this case has come from 3 Chicago area reporters. This is why we need local news. If it was up to CNN, we would never heard any of this. And another tweet from Charlie DeMar, video from inside taxi of Osundairo brothers on their way to meet Jussie Smollett, night of reported attack, according to Chicago Police Department. Yes, comments from Twitter. I didn't know the Michelin Man had a posse. Why are they dressed like beekeepers? I love the hazmat look. Fabulous, really. It's also an outtake from Empire Strikes Back when Luke almost died in the snow before Han rescued him. Are those guys supposed to be clan or snow ninjas? Jussie meant to say they were dressed in white, not actually white people. Is that going to be his defense? No, his defense turned out to be that a former homosexual lover, one of the Nigerian bodybuilders, felt slighted because he broke it off with him and decided to make up this story out of spite. Now, of course, amusingly, Smollett said, he said that, but he also said, I still don't know who attacked me, but that they were white. No, that they were pale, because the Nigerian brothers are much, much blacker in skin tone than Jussie Smollett is. Let's have a look at the chat. Hello to Dan, Benjamin K, Anrun, Chogokin 666, Professor Paul, Kakwa Pajoetia, to Anrun, William Hicks. Anrun says it is possible it only gets probation or very minimal jail time. Don from Beyond says, hi guys, hello to you too. Chogokin 666 says his defense was essentially putting his fingers over his eyes and saying, you can't see me. Matt Beck says, I would like an apology from everybody on the UN's review who said this day would never come. David Wright says, a man who has a craving for a deli sandwich late at night is now never safe. This is not the America I want or knew. Yeah, it's what, 2:15 in the morning in Chicago in January? Must have Subway sandwich. Yeah, okay. Hauper says modern day lynching is truer than Kamala realizes. They're happening everywhere. Hello to Oscar Toe and Dr. Dead Name. I remember pictures of people holding up We Believe Jussie signs. There was a rally at the legislature in Victoria, provincial legislature, which is, I don't know, it's about a 10, 12 mile walk from where I'm staying now. And it was, I can't see any reporting in the local news on this. I saw a whole bunch of cars and heard them outside my window honking before 3 o'clock. They were obviously on the way to the rally. It's described as the Nuremberg Doctors Trial 75th anniversary, 1946 to 2021. On December 9th, 1946, the Nazi doctors' trial began in Nuremberg, Germany. These doctors were charged for medical crimes, which included experimenting on people without their informed consent. We, the people of BC, will take our stand in front of the legislature in Victoria to honor the Nuremberg Medical Code and to protect our rights guaranteed under the highest laws of Canada, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms enshrined in our Canadian Constitution. Top politicians in BC used COVID to grab dictatorial powers through the BC Emergency Program Act. This emergency act was created for floods and forest fires. A 2-week sunset clause was wisely written into the act to stop misuse of assumptive power. That is why politicians or their frontline actors, such as Bonnie Henry, kept renewing it every 2 weeks. 2 weeks ballooned into 2 months and is now heading toward 2 years with no end in sight. Their charade must end now. Power has corrupted these politicians. They have disregarded the Nuremberg Code directives for human experimentation established during the doctor's trial. They mandate measures and push mRNA therapy. They do not make the recipient, the politicians pushing these experimental mRNA injections don't have a clue about the harm they are causing. How would they know when the long-term trials are not completed. So as I say, I took a look for, how many people were there, that sort of thing. But Victoria Times Colonist, apparently not covering it. Nothing on their Twitter feed. Same with the Saanich News. I don't know. Perhaps they've just made an editorial decision to ignore these protests, of which there have been quite a few in Victoria. So, Oberon Waugh, you all know my opinion of him. I think he's the greatest journalist that I've ever seen. He wrote this on July the 10th, 1980. Ugly women, in my experience, are seldom to be trusted. They have an inner bitterness which may take the form of religious activism or political fanaticism. There is usually a defect in their characters to match the physical flaw. And this takes us to an Australian woman who is called Jacqui Lambie. And she is very upset that a certain tennis player might be coming to her country. This is from Charlie Coe and Mariah Davis for the Daily Mail Australia. Jacqui Lambie has blasted Novak Djokovic after the Australian Open named him on its competition entry list, despite the world number one refusing to reveal if he is fully vaccinated. Tennis Australia named the 34-year-old an outspoken COVID vaccine skeptic on its official list for the Melbourne Grand Slam on Wednesday. The Tasmanian senator on Thursday morning said the rules were simple and Djokovic shouldn't receive any special treatment. And I'm now looking at a video of Jacqui Lambie, and oi, what a pan. I don't give a stuff whether you're the number one, she told the Today Show. You're either double vaccinated or not. If you're not double vaccinated, you're not coming in. Reports emerged on Wednesday the tennis great could pursue a medical exemption if he wasn't vaccinated, a loophole allowing him to compete in the tournament and enter Australia without quarantining. I don't know where the loophole comes from. You're either double vaxxed or you're not, Lambie said. And there's another picture of her. Lee. Okay, so what do we know about this woman, Jacqui Lambie? And her name is spelled Jacqui because, of course, and it is short for Jacqueline, which her parents decided to spell Jacqueline. And as always, I remember Kingsley Amos in this regard, that either her parents fancied themselves artistic or they simply didn't know how to spell. Jacqueline Louise Lambie, this is from Wikipedia, born February 26, 1971, is an Australian politician who is the leader and founder of the Jacqui Lambie Network. She was a senator for Tasmania from 2014 to 2017 and was re-elected in 2019. What is the Jacqui Lambie Network? It's a populist political party in Australia. It has served as a political vehicle for the former Independent. The JLN was formed to allow Lambie to recontest her Senate seat at the 2016 federal election after she resigned from the Palmer United Party in 2014. Okay, so again, let's just go through the bio here. Lambie was born in the town of Ulverston in northwestern Tasmania. Her parents separated when she was 13 and was raised in a public housing estate in Devonport, where she attended Devonport High School until she left at year 11. She enlisted in the Australian Army in 1989. She completed her recruit training while unknowingly pregnant with her first child, a fact the Army took 4 months to recognize, or she simply kept it secret. After basic training, she was assigned to the Royal Australian Corps of Transport in 1990. She remained there for 5 years before being transferred to the Royal Australian Corps of Military Police, where she worked for another 5 years, achieving the rank of corporal. During a field exercise in July 1997, Lambie sustained a back injury, resulting in long-term detriments to her spine. After physiotherapy and medical intervention, she was unable to regain operational fitness and was discharged on medical grounds. This prompted her to pursue a claim for a military pension from the Department of Veterans Affairs. She has since been an advocate for veterans. The Department of Veterans Affairs initially rejected her application for compensation, but subsequently approved it and put her on a military disability pension. She later applied for compensation for depression related to her back pain, which was also initially rejected. The DVA hired a private investigation firm to conduct 5 hours of surveillance on her activities within her home. On the basis of this surveillance, the department concluded she was a malingerer, canceling her military pension and coverage of her medical care. Lambie fought the department's conclusion for 5 years, during which time she was accepted for a Centrelink disability pension. In 2006, the Administrative Appeals Tribunal was about to rule on whether the video evidence was admissible in her case when the DVA abandoned its use of the video and accepted that Lambie was entitled to compensation. The tribunal's deputy president, Justice Christopher Wright, concluded that it is likely that even greater improvement would have been achieved a long time ago if her medical treatments, which were initially funded by the respondent, had not been terminated in 2001. So the Department of Veterans Affairs has video demonstrating that Jacqui Lambie was a malingerer and faking the extent of her injuries. Oh, and first of all, is this admissible? And the Department of Veterans Affairs says, who cares? Lambie's political involvement began in 2008 when she began working for Tasmanian Labor Senator Nick Sherry. In November 2011, she joined the Liberal Party of Australia and later decided to run for pre-selection for the division of Braddon. However, she subsequently left the Liberal Party, saying that the Liberals are a boys' club, and she joined to infiltrate them to see what she could learn about politics. In 2012, Lambie sold her house to help fund her run as an independent before turning to the newly formed Palmer United Party, founded by billionaire Clive Palmer. As she said, I just didn't have the money like the big players did for advertising. So she resigned from the Palmer United Party in 2014, announcing she would remain in the Senate as an independent. So she resigned from the Senate in 2017 after revealing she held both British and Australian nationality, prohibited under Section 44 of the Australian Constitution. She stated in her resignation that she wished to return to federal politics and that if Justine Kay was forced to resign from her seat of Braddon over her citizenship status, then she would consider running. In 2018, the High Court ruled that Devonport Mayor Steve Martin would replace Lambie as Senator of Tasmania. So she was re-elected to the Senate in the 2019 Australian federal election. And what did she get? 6.45 of the vote. Yeah, this is one of the many reasons why you do not want proportional representation in your country. It's a thieves' charter for politicians on the principle that dogs do not attack dogs. Dogs don't bite dogs. And of course, the party gets to, party comes up with a list. This gives political parties even more power than they have already. And if you just read about her positions, she announced plans in 2014 to introduce a private member's bill aimed at banning the burqa in Australia. In January 2017, she said that Australia should follow Donald Trump's lead in his order to restrict entry of citizens of certain Muslim-majority countries to the USA. In 2018, the next year, in an interview with ABC News, she distanced herself from her previous views on Sharia law, stating that she didn't want to be divisive and that she was influenced by a previous advisor that was really driving that in. Following her involvement in the TV show Go Back to Where You Came From in 2018, where she was placed in the Syrian war zone, Lambie shifted towards a pro-refugee stance, stating the discussion about accepting more refugees needs to be on the political table. This is the kind of people who run our lives now. I mean, it would be difficult to think of someone more worthless than this woman. Everything about her inspires laughter. But here she is, a Australian senator, and waving her fist. And we're not going to allow some foreign tennis player in my country. Well, I don't know. When did Australia adopt proportional representation? I wonder. Does its recent how connected is that to Australia's recent decline, its recent fall? That's an interesting question. And let's look at the province of Ontario and the latest numbers. This is from Cody Wilson at CP24. Ontario is reporting nearly 1,300 new COVID-19 cases today, the highest single-day tally in the province in more than 6 months. Vaccines stop infection. So why are infection rates rising rapidly? How could this happen? Again, miasma, perhaps, or an imbalance of humors? Provincial health officials logged 1,290 new infections today, up from 1,009 on Wednesday and 959 1 week ago. The 7-day rolling average of new cases also hit a more than 6-month high Thursday. Of the cases reported today, 548 are in those who are unvaccinated, 42 involve people who are partially vaccinated, 617 are in those who are fully immunized, and 83 involve people with an unknown vaccination status. About 80% of all Ontarians have received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, and 76% are considered fully inoculated. About 42% of the new cases confirmed today were found in the approximately 20% of the population who remain unvaccinated. They've been pushing this number hard, but they're going to stop pushing that number because it's going to become less and less friendly to them. And let's hear, this is from Kane at Citizen Free Press. This is not the kind of information that gets reported by the Canadian media. An MPP, member of the provincial parliament in Ontario, his name is Nichols, says there's been a 28-time increase in stillbirths in multiple parts of Canada. In the Waterloo area, 86 stillbirths have occurred from January to July, and normally it's one stillbirth every 2 months. But here's the kicker. Mothers of stillbirth babies were fully vaccinated. This was reported in Steve Kirsch's Substack. And it's not happening. It's all fake. It's a conspiracy theory. Ontario's Minister of Health, Christine Elliott, was questioned in the Ontario Provincial Parliament by MPP Rick Nichols about it and asked for evidence. She just said it has been tested, it is safe, and we should all trust the health officials. In other words, there's no evidence that she could cite, but you should trust us because we've all concluded it is safe. Note that Nichols is one of the really good guys. He's now an independent after having been kicked out of the Progressive Conservative Party due to his views about the vaccine. You aren't allowed to tell the truth in the PC party, apparently. And, how long is this going to go on in Canada? Who knows? Who knows? This is from Hina Alam at Canada's National Observer. Putting an end to the COVID-19 pandemic will mean priming the immune systems of everyone on Earth. Well, that doesn't sound threatening at all, or potentially disastrous, does it? Priming the immune systems of everyone on Earth. But the virus is spreading quickly and may take years to settle down, says an infectious disease specialist. Just as some scientists started to voice the idea that COVID-19 might have reached the peak in its evolution with Delta, and people began taking steps to learn how to live with the virus, a new variant struck. Omicron has been identified in several parts of the world. Dr. Isaac Bogach, an infectious disease specialist at the University of Toronto and ubiquitous in the media for months, said that while vaccines are extremely important, strong political leadership and policy is what will help bring COVID-19 under control, a strategy reinforced by the emergence of the Omicron variant. I'm just guessing here, but what's likely going to happen is this virus is not going to go away for a long, long, long time, he said in an interview. Oh, so vaccines were going to take care of this problem, but that has not happened. But they're extremely important, but strong political leadership is needed. But meanwhile, get jabbed and get jabbed again, and then get jabbed one more time. One more time. Well, for now, one more time. And yeah, he, I responded to him on Twitter that when the 3 jabs fail, just as the 2 jabs have failed, what are you going to recommend? 4 jabs, 5 jabs, 6 jabs, 7 jabs? Why can't you just admit that your vaccine god is a false idol? They would sooner do anything than admit that. Do you think I was joking about 7 jabs? This is from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News, a top Israeli scientist, and hang on just a second, his name is going to come up here on the video. His name is Professor Arnon Afek. He has warned that it will take at least 7 booster shots for people to be considered fully vaccinated and be able to live their lives without massive restrictions. I was joking that was this going to become a quarterly thing? Is it going to become a monthly thing? Not so much of a joke anymore, unfortunately. This is from BizPac Review. With the holiday season in full swing and Americans eager to gather with family again after more than a year of dystopian lockdowns, Dr. Anthony Fauci is again pumping the brakes. The director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and the chief medical advisor to President Joe Biden ignited backlash after telling Americans they should ask friends and relatives to essentially show their papers before getting together. Quote, one thing the vaccinated people can feel comfortable with, for example, let's take the holiday setting. You're with your family, you have grandparents and parents and children. When you get vaccinated and you have a vaccinated group and you are in an indoor setting, you can enjoy, as we have traditionally over the years, dinners and gatherings within the home with people who are vaccinated. People should, if they invite people over to their home, essentially ask and maybe require that people show evidence that they are vaccinated. I don't know. Perhaps Dr. Fauci should be required to show evidence that he is in fact human. Oh, it gets on the West Coast, even in the North, it typically doesn't get that cold in autumn and winter. It rains a lot, though. And when one is wet, one certainly feels colder. This is from Katie Davis Court. Child abuse. Kindergartners are forced to eat lunch outside in 40-degree weather at Capitol Hill Elementary School in Portland, Oregon. They sit on buckets to social distance from their classmates. And does anyone doubt that there is not a very high level of sadism involved in all of this? Let's see what William Briggs, statistician to the stars, has to say. And another excerpt from his book, Everything You Believe is Wrong. Somebody might get hurt. The precaution, caution. Word is, our beneficent government, which loves us and would not see us fall into harm, is working on a design for a system of change to anchor both citizens and our non-citizen visitors firmly to the earth. Why? Because gravity might reverse itself. That, dear reader, despite its rank absurdity, is a true statement. Gravity might reverse itself. And if it does, we'd be in some pretty deep kimchi. So the government would be well justified in shackling us to the ground. What we have is an actual possibility, a non-zero probability of an unimaginable calamity. The ill effects of the calamity would be so awful that nobody could calculate them. Why, they'd be costlier than the entire federal debt times two. It would be so horrific that the hosts of NPR would raise their voices. Yet the whole thing is obviously preposterous. Look out! This is the somebody might get hurt fallacy, aka the what about the children fallacy, aka the we're all going to die fallacy, aka better safe than sure fallacy. It is the only fallacy that comes with an exclamation point. Technically, it should also be written in italics to emphasize its dire nature. The only time this fallacy is written about soberly is when it appears in scientific literature, where it is called the precautionary principle. And of course, the precautionary principle is behind Extinction Rebellion. To give one example, the old joke used to be that a sweater was defined as an article of clothing that a child put on when its mother got cold. The joke is the same, but without the laughs when mother has been swapped for government. Now for the structure of the fallacy. The problem lies in the nature of contingency. All physical events, such as gravity reversing itself, the climate spinning out of control and forcing the atmosphere to resemble a giant pizza oven, plastic bags tainting the water supply, turning us all into three-armed mutants, dust in air causing hearts to seize up solid, and on, are all contingent possibilities. Contingent physical events are not logically necessary. It is a rock-solid, undefeatable fact of the universe that what happened could have happened differently, and thus what might happen could be virtually anything. Mountains might grow legs and dance, goats might swell to terrible size and begin goring the populace, social justice warriors might become tolerant of dissent. Anything that can be imagined to happen that is not impossible to happen might happen. This includes the worst that could happen. The world might be destroyed. Yet just as the entire planet may be in peril, it may also be saved if only we exert enough effort to guard against the danger. The costs incurred from an apocalypse would by definition be astronomical, incalculably large, almost infinite. Therefore, no expense would be too large, no measure would be too draconian, no action would be too desperate to save the planet. Anything the government wants to do would be justified as long as it is done in the name of saving the planet. The kicker is that because any peril that can be named might happen, those that rule over us always have an excuse for any action. As long as the peril is made convincing enough, and if the action can be justified in the name of removing the peril. In spite of these indisputable truths, the somebody might get hurt fallacy is an informal and not a formal fallacy, much in the way that the no true Scotsman and slippery slope are informal fallacies. This means that calling out an argument by labeling it one of those fallacies is not a rigorous proof your enemy's argument is false. This is why it never does any logical good to tell the government that its latest action is silly or absurd. They can always retort truthfully that unimaginable evils await unless they have their way. Still, the somebody might get hurt fallacy is an informal fallacy, which means it can't be answered. And again, this is from William Briggs's new book, Everything You Believe is Wrong. And his website is wmbriggs.com. And let's check out to see whether there's anything new here. Oh, yes. This is from Eugipius's Substack. Against Omicron and Governance Theater, Curtis Yarvin's latest analysis of the pandemic is lazy, stupid, and wrong. On Sunday, neo-reactionary thinker Curtis Yarvin, aka Mencius Moldbug, posted a series of strange stream of consciousness ramblings about the pandemic to his Substack Grey Mirror. He's long tended towards lazy, ignorant alarmism when it comes to corona, but his latest piece on Omicron and governance theater is particularly awful. It is time to say it plainly. Yarvin's best thinking is years behind him now, and many of us should probably start paying a lot less attention to him. After this piece, I'll be doing that. Everything in Yarvin's essay is some degree of wrong or manipulative or stupid. There is this laughable and totally broken distinction between the meta-organization that is science that only grudgingly approved the vaccines and scientists in the meta-organization that is capitalism who actually invented the vaccines. As if pharmaceuticals and the regulatory apparatus that surrounds them could ever be disentangled from each other. There is this ridiculous statement that science's headlock on the product cycle is strong enough that we only have very leaky, slightly dangerous first-generation vaccines, as if humans hadn't tried and failed to develop successful vaccines against coronavirus for decades. There are his slanderous lines about the Swedes licking doorknobs and committing strongly to ignoring the virus, and his hilariously wrong statement that Singapore has decided to do the same thing, which they can get away with, well, because it's Singapore. There is his acknowledgement that COVID should not be exaggerated, which was an error he committed in the past, probably because I was betting on it, LOL. It's comforting that he's able to laugh about errors like this almost 2 years after participating in a mass hysteria that has brought about some of the widest-ranging, most destructive and pointless interferences in civilian life since World War II. He presses his nonchalance further, insisting that, quote, "It is a gnarly disease, not an apocalyptic one. It has surely cost way less QALYS than World War II, but it is still gnarly. The mortality rates of COVID for younger populations do not justify emergency governance measures. The morbidity rates for middle-aged populations do," unquote. Yarvin has only internalized that subset of information about corona and the pandemic that support his belief in mass containment. In fact, corona increases everyone's mortality risk proportionally. The only reason it's worse for middle-aged populations is that middle-aged populations are more likely to die already. If the heightened mortality risk for younger populations isn't enough to justify emergency government's measures, then the proportionally greater mortality risk that 48-year-old Curtis Yarvin faces isn't either. But these are side matters. What Yarvin really wants is for the West to be more like China, because China has proved, quote, that controlling the virus is possible, unquote, thereby allowing its subjects to live with far fewer COVID restrictions than citizens of the reddest American red state. Alas, he laments that instead we have ended up not with proper, rigorous Chinese-style containment, but with mere containment theater. This is a bad argument, and Yarvin should stop making it. So, let us go to, let's see whether there's anything. Oh, yes, lots here at a Substack by an author whose initials are AB. Attention citizens. Your Department of Pandemia wishes to inform you about the status of the pandemia. Yes, we're almost 2 years in. We can't believe it either. We're so proud. And big business is backing off. GE, 3M, and Verizon have also stopped forcing vaccinations. And oh yeah, HCA, the largest hospital chain in America. So that's over 500,000 employees set free right there. And previously, Oracle, world's #2 software company, 132,000 employees will not mandate COVID vaccinations. This follows the federal district court stay of the Biden vaccine mandate for federal contractors. So they told us that resistance would be futile, but apparently that is not true. The Atlantic asked the question we all want to know. Is it safe to hang out with the unboosted? Remember, you never go full ding and you never go full Atlantic. Is unboosted even a word? I guess it is now. By the way, the Atlantic changed the headline. Apparently, it was too embarrassing even for them. Imagine being too embarrassing for the Atlantic. And he has a piece which is non-COVID related, which is about Abigail Shrier, and who I will be speaking about a little later. A call to arms from Abigail Shrier, who annoys the powers that be nearly as much as I do, for having the temerity to insist there are two genders. Anyway, this is one hell of a piece, and you should read it. Go and fear no more. And I reviewed Abigail Shrier's book on the book club a few months ago. This is from Michael P. Sanger, tweet. Good Morning Britain deletes Twitter poll after 89% of respondents indicate they would not support mandatory COVID vaccination. Suppressio veri, they call it. They're saying the wrong things. This is from Steve Watson at Summit News. The UK Health Secretary has stated he has no interest in legislating for mandatory COVID vaccinations, describing such a policy as unethical. In an interview with the BBC, Sajid Javid said, my view is that it's unethical and also at a practical level, it wouldn't work. The comments come a day after Prime Minister Boris Johnson said there will come a point for a national conversation on mandatory vaccinations. Briggs was talking about the seemingly impossible becoming possible. You could call that the Boris Johnson story. That fellow is capable of anything. And let's take a look at dailyskeptic.org. Boris Johnson calls for a national debate on mandatory vaccination to protect UK from COVID. Prime Minister reluctant to consider compulsory jabs, but wants talks on how to boost uptake, saying UK cannot keep introducing restrictions indefinitely, reports the Telegraph. When politicians, talk about the need for having a talk about something or a national debate, what it means is we are going to tell you what you must think. Why did Pfizer refuse to distribute the vaccine in countries which didn't grant indemnity? I think to ask the question is to answer it, isn't it? Okay. Ex-MI6 chief Richard Dearlove says Britain's science sector has been compromised by, quote, malign Chinese communist influence, unquote. The Food and Drug Administration of the United States won't release the Pfizer vaccine data for another 75 years. More than 60 Tory MPs set to revolt on Plan B vote. That's, more lockdowns. Plan B has nothing to do with the Great Reset. It's a back of the fag packet bodge, writes Toby Young in the Mail. A friend sent me a message last night after Boris Johnson had unveiled Plan B at a hastily arranged press conference. Still think it's a cock-up and not a conspiracy? I can see his point. After all, how strong is the medical case for the restrictions announced last night? The number of Omicron cases may be doubling every few days, but what evidence is there that vaccine passports will flatten the curve? Germany has had a COVID certification scheme in place for weeks, yet it has a higher number of cases per day than we do. The Scottish government published a 70-page document last month making the case for vaccine passports, but neglected to include a single scrap of evidence that they work, which is hardly surprising since people who've been double jabbed are still becoming infected and infecting others, albeit at a lower rate than the unvaccinated. How else to explain the fact that daily cases are creeping up, even though, according to the Office for National Statistics, 95% of English adults have antibodies? If the jabs don't prevent you from catching the old variant, what hope is there that the vaccine passports will stop the spread of the new variant? So why the last-minute panicky announcement? My conspiracy-minded friend thinks it's all part of a worldwide plan. He believes that since March of last year, the government has been doing the bidding of a small cabal of powerful billionaires who want to control the world's population via vaccine passports and other biosecurity measures. The problem with this theory is that the government isn't capable of planning something 48 hours in advance, let alone 21 months. In a testy exchange yesterday on BBC Radio 4's Today program, Dominic Raab categorically denied Plan B was actively being considered, only for the Prime Minister to announce it the following day. I've known Boris for more than 30 years and at one stage worked for him when he was editor of The Spectator. I've always been fond of him, but the chances of him being enlisted in a global conspiracy by Bill Gates and his pals are vanishing to zero. That would be like planning a casino heist with Mr. Bean. You know, with the Boris Johnson government, well, and with the government before that, and the government before that in Britain, it really is the thick of it come to life, because people complained, the thick of it, that the politicians were not given enough credit. You may dislike politicians, but you have to credit them with what? With not being, arrogant yet panicky weasels. Boris Johnson, Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. That never stops being hilarious. It's from Kane at Citizen Free Press. California unveils plan to become an abortion sanctuary if the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade. The proposal would include paying for travel, lodging, and procedures for people from other states who want to have an abortion. Wow, California has come up with a way to make baby killing grow the GDP. How about that? Huh? How about that? You may have seen something called Rational Wiki. And every so often I go there, or I see quotations from it. And it seems to me, that when they say rational, they just mean atheist. That's all they mean. Abigail Shrier, this is her entry. Abigail Krauser Shrier, born 1978, is a transphobic American freelance journalist. She has written about trans people in several major publications, most notably the Wall Street Journal, but is probably best known for her 2020 book, Irreversible Damage, an anti-trans tirade that claims girls are being driven to become boys by a social contagion. So apparently it is the rational position that if a man says that he is a woman, he is just like that. And if a woman says that she is a man, she becomes a man just like that. That apparently is the rational decision. Oh, academic and author Grace Lavery, similarly, has taken issue with Shrier's fertility fear-mongering, charging her with, quote, reaping the benefit of a widely believed and utterly debunked conspiracy theory that people perform hysterectomies on children, unquote. Schreyer's message is that parents should be more concerned that transitioning may preclude pregnancy and nursing for their AFAB children than how being denied the right to exist on their own terms and forced to go through unwanted and permanent puberty changes will impact their mental and physical health for the rest of their lives. I don't know. Is there someone I could sue? Is there some sort of, could I turn society upside down because I've concluded that old age is definitely an unwanted change that will impact my mental and physical health for the rest of my life? I mean, why haven't scientists cured death yet? Tell them to pull the finger out. Anyway, Abigail Shrier gave a speech to the students of Princeton, and you can find it at her Substack, which is called The Truth Fairy. And I'm looking at a picture of her at a lectern, and she is quite an attractive woman, going back to what Oberyn Waugh said. I always do an image check for a name new to me, a female name new to me. And there are some exceptions, but almost invariably, the people spouting the craziest things are ugly, even hideous looking. Abigail Shrier said at Princeton, the question I get most often, the thing that most interviewers want to know, even when they're pretending to care about more high-minded things, is what's it like to be so hated? I can only assume that's what some of you rubberneckers want to know as well. What's it like to be on a GLAAD blacklist? What's it like to have top ACLU lawyers come out in favor of banning your book? What's it like to have prestigious institutions disavow you as an alum? What's it like to lose the favor of the fancy people who once claimed you as their own? Well, this is what she says. It's freeing. That's what it feels like. It's freeing. The actions of man are never free. 18th century determinist Baron Holbach once wrote, they are always the necessary consequence of his temperament, of the received ideas, and of the notions, either true or false, which he has formed to himself, of happiness, of his opinions, strengthened by examples. Strengthened by example, by education, and by daily experience. I remember reading those lines as an undergraduate, Schreier said, tugged by the worry that Holbach was right. Maybe our motivations were determined by our personalities and upbringing and received ideas. Today, I read them and think, if only. In 2021, it seems a luxury to worry that a will determined and shaped entirely by received ideas and our own personality-driven desires might not be entirely free. Today, before any of us decides what it is we want, we open our phones and participate in our own manipulation at the hands of those who actively want us to think and see and vote differently than our own wills would have us do. If we were not entirely free before, in other words, we are far less so now. Every dating app pushes us toward the same few attractive mate choices. Spotify presses us to like the same music. Amazon pushes us to purchase specific books and away from others. If you're under the impression that the books Amazon recommends to you are based solely on a content-neutral algorithm, I can disabuse you of that fiction right now. I once asked one of my sources at Amazon, who was concerned about the way the search results were being manipulated, whether he'd ever seen a book deliberately boosted. Yes, he said, Becoming by Michelle Obama. When that book came out, he told me virtually every search you did led to the recommendation to buy the former First Lady's book. And the opposite is also true. There are books that are never recommended by the Amazon algorithm, irrespective of how well they've sold or how likely a specific shopper is to buy them, or at least there's one such book. I'll let you try and guess what it is. And you can find that once again on Abigail Schreier's Substack called The Truth Fairy. Hang on just one second. Okay. Aspirin. Okay. Let's go to the chat. German food is underrated, says Chokokin 666. Good schnitzel is so good. It's from the same source. Home fries and creamed spinach, little red cabbage. What are we talking about? House of Cards. Quick advice. Don't watch the American version. It's rubbish. Watch the British version with Ian Richardson, a comedic and, well, sinister genius. That's my advice on that subject. Also, the female lead. Oh, in the American, I watched the first 2 seasons of it, and oh yeah, we want to hire you at a really good salary for our cutting edge blog. And take as much time as you need for your stories. What fantasy world does this come from? Publish every day, several times a day. That's what she would have been told. And the idea that reporters are out there for scoops? Really? They want to break news? Ho, ho, ho. Also, yeah, the woman in the British version, much, much more attractive than the one in the American series, who it's a disturbing trend in Hollywood. The American actress, she's part of a famous acting family, also a football family. Can't remember the name offhand. All her bits are in the right places, but her face has such a childish affect that I know it's just not attractive. I don't like adult women who look like children. And I could speculate on why Hollywood seems to be turning more and more to adult women who look like children. William Stewart says, so politicians invoking national debate are like women saying, we need to talk. Yes. Hello to Mephistopheles Ghost. Metal Mike says, has Kevin Spacey actually turned into his House of Cards character? Is something happened with regard to Kevin Spacey? Mephistopheles asks, is Kevin back in a hotel? Yes, I've been here since this time around, since December the 17th, 2020. So we're coming up on that big 1-year anniversary. There have been like 3 or 4 Kevin Spacey sexual assault accusers who have conveniently died right before their trial or died by suicide after making their accusations, says Ashi Main Bravo. So Mollberg went all Steve Saylor and Ford on us and freaked out over COVID, says British American. Yes, apparently so. Hey, Doug Ford, leave those kids alone, says Metal Mike. Well, of course, as I was saying the other day, that Doug Ford's Conservative government has decided that there's not enough children in the province of Ontario being sexually mutilated. So they're going to pass a bill called Bill 17, which is going to arrange for a committee of mutilated people and other alphabet people who are going to facilitate the sexual mutilation of even more Ontario boys and girls. William Hicks says 3 jabs. She's once, twice, 3 times a lady. Does Fauci research the most obnoxious things to proclaim? Asks Chogokin 666. Actually, Main Bravo says Illinois state bill proposes to strip the unvaxxed of health insurance. David Wright says, wait for the conflation between the anti-vaxxers and the unvaccinated. Welcome to our leper colony, guys. Yes, the definition of fully vaccinated is going to be changed, and it's going to be changed soon. So those numbers from Ontario, oh, well, you see, if you haven't got the 3rd jab, you're not fully vaccinated. So the number of fully vaccinated people among the new cases, it goes from like this to like that instantly. Have you seen Dave Chappelle's comedy bit on the Jussie Smollett incident, says Ashiman Bravo? Yes, I have, and it is very, very funny. Because, I'm sure Chappelle saw through this immediately, because he's black, right? White people were afraid to, because, well, no, I mean, I could get in trouble for this. Let's see. Got the Criterion DVD of The Third Man, says William Hicks. Forgot Harry Lime was sought after by the police for diluting penicillin, which killed and crippled a bunch of adults and children. Harry was a piker. Is the Nuremberg Code significant in any way? Asked Oscar Toad. Yes, indeed it is, because people are not allowed to be bullied into experimental treatments, according to the Nuremberg Code. And they're certainly being bullied now. Brandon Smith cites the Coalition of the Mutilated. Jogakin 666 says, maybe you need a lawyer for your lawyer, Kevin. Yeah. Remember that video that Kevin Spacey unloaded a while back saying some very cryptic stuff, insinuating taking down people if they went after him for sexual allegations? It would appear that Kevin Spacey was directing some theater in London, and he appeared one day with a beaten face, and he claimed that he'd been walking his dog in a park in the middle of the night or early in the morning, and that the dog had just, with its tremendous strength, had slammed into the ground. Yeah, a likely story. And I may have said this before, but there was this debate for many years as to whether Spacey was batting for the other team, and he was up for the Academy Award for that terrible movie that he made about, how people who don't like homosexuals are all secretly homosexual themselves. He took his mother to the Oscars, and I thought, okay, now that debate is settled. Because again, if you were nominated for an Oscar, particularly, in one of the acting Oscars, and you're a man You can pretty much have any woman you want. Call up any woman you want, and she'll go to the Oscars with you because she wants to be seen on TV by tens of millions of people. There is a piece here in Unheard by Aris Rusinos called "The Tories Can Learn from the American Right." Tonight, the world's eyes are on Washington, declared Newsnight's Emily Maitlis recently, referring to the abortion debate currently going through America's Supreme Court. No doubt, in the dark forests of the Ituri, Twa hunters paused their age-old stalking of game to deliberate on Mississippi's new legislation. In the glittering skyscrapers of Shanghai and Guangzhou, the Chinese economy ground to a halt as industrialists awaited Amy Coney Barrett's contentious deliberation. High in the mountains of Bolivia, peasant farmers abandoned their timeless struggle with the frigid Andean soil, huddling in their villages to confer on what this could all mean for America's women. Obviously, this is fantasy, like most British political commentary. It is Britain's political comment class alone who are so destructively enamored of the political theater of a distant foreign country that American news crowds out our own in the battle for attention. Yet this colonized mindset is only true of a specific shade of American politics, an identitarian left liberal strand tailor-made for our mid-Atlantic Twitter class. I'll mention this. Reporters, well, people in journalism, with few exceptions, suffer from what years ago I dubbed reporter's disease. That is to say, this is the misconception that practically everyone cares as much about politics as you do. And this is one of the reasons why their reporting is so often a fantasy. But back to Rusinos. Londoners rioted in protest against policing in Minnesota, and our increasingly deranged discourse is directly cut and pasted from U.S. models. Well, the same is true of Canada, of course. But the twists and tangles of American conservative politics are more or less unknown in our own semi-digested imperial province. A clear example of this dynamic can be found in the rise of what some term America's New Right, well documented in a critical but fair and accurate portrayal by the left-wing New Republic's Sam Adler-Bell, an uneasy alliance of state capitalist national conservatives, post-liberals, and Catholic integralists. The New Right wants to see Republicans abandon their fealty to free market dogmas, embrace traditional Christianity, and use the levers of state power to wage the culture war for keeps. Like younger conservatives in Britain, a young New Right writer quoted by Adler-Bell observes that, quote, "We have to think of ourselves as counter-revolutionaries or restorationists who are overthrowing the regime, as the conservatism of their elders has simply failed in its essential task. There's not a lot left to conserve in the contemporary state of things. There are things that need to be destroyed and rebuilt," unquote. The parallels with Britain are clear. In America, the conservative establishment has ossified into a decadent, self-dealing oligarchy that has adopted the moral heresies of so-called wokeness and clings to the rotted corpse of the Reaganite consensus. The conservative old guard just want to run the greatest hits of 1984 over and over again. Surveying our own conservative scene in Britain, we see the same dismal picture. The potential challengers to Boris's rapidly waning authority include Rishi Sunak, a free marketeer crippled under the weight of his treasury brain, and Liz Truss, gleefully capering around in one of the army's few remaining tanks in homage to Thatcher, keeping alive a Tory cargo cult that should have died decades ago. The Tories possess the single electoral benefit of not being the Labour Party, but they have no coherent vision of the good and offer little to any forward-thinking conservative. Why is this the case, given the total Americanization of British politics? Why do the intellectual currents revolutionizing the American right here remain a mere object of curiosity to an idiosyncratic minority of conservative thinkers? It is hard not to think that Thatcherism has played a major role in the intellectual debilitation of the British right. The ideas that most animate the party faithful are the same ones put into practice overwhelmingly disastrously 40 years ago. The free market think tanks, which cluster around CCHQ, are still trying to realize the fever dreams of fin de siècle Vienna intellectuals. The Tory party remains trapped in the long 20th century, weighed down by corporate boomers and their lobbyist hirelings. Indeed, the paucity of Conservative Party thought today is such that there is more value in adapting Marxist analysis to Tory ends than in reading anything excreted from the party's ecosystem. As a result, Conservative MPs whine about wokeness on Twitter instead of using their parliamentary majority to repeal the raft of new Labour legislation that foisted a Blairite shadow government on this country. The dense web of state-funded quangos, NGOs, and bureaucrats that sets the tone of British political discourse and frustrates Tory party at every turn. No wonder Tories win elections and yet are amazed they can't change Britain's political culture. They waste their energy fighting the symptoms while subsidizing the causes. You know, it's commonplace in Canada that for so-called conservative leaders to reassure everyone at the start of an election campaign, or perhaps months before, no, I'm not going to fire a single civil servant. Oh, golly, why would you not want to fire your enemies? These people are working against your interests. They're working against the interests of the people. And as we discovered in COVID, when most of them just went home, and how many of them have returned? If you have a job where you can just go home and apparently nothing changes, then your job is useless. And it should be the number one priority, the so-called right-wing party, to hurt its enemies, to fire them from their useless and destructive jobs, to zero out all AstroTurf groups, all NGOs, every single one. But they don't do this because they don't want to be considered to be mean-spirited. Oh, we're not like our enemies. Oh, you mean the guys who keep winning? The guys who have been winning for decades? No. We don't want to be like that. We would rather lose than, surrender our sense of decorum, which is really the most important thing in politics. There's another piece here from Unheard by Giles Fraser. It's time for Boris to go. We used to call it the TD at school, and it was a terribly effective strategy, total denial. No matter what evidence they have on you, even if caught red-handed, just TD it. A teacher saw you coming out of the Crown. He wasn't even on the other side of the street, but right there in front of you as you walked out of the pub. He reported it to your housemaster, who called you through into his study. Just TD it. Give no ground. But Mr. O'Hanrahan saw you as broad as day, he says. Look them in the eye and say with total assurance, nope, sorry, it wasn't me. If you can find some way to believe in your own words, so much the better. Forget our post-truth era. Boorish public school boys have been at this for generations. The school authorities didn't quite know what to do with the TD, and nor does the former director of public prosecutions, for that matter. On the matter of Downing Street Christmas parties, Boris is doing a classic total denial. It's my party, and I'll lie if I want to. Everyone knows what he is up to, but there is always just a little anxiety when you say something like the word lie, especially in print. Can you soften it a bit? Comes many an editor's cautious reply. Just say it a little differently. That's why the TD is so effective. It bludgeons people into submission. The situation is not complicated. Christmas parties were not allowed. They were illegal, and people were fined for holding them, yet clearly they had one at number 10 Downing Street. It makes no difference if the social distancing rules were kept. The Prime Minister has now ordered an inquiry into the matter, which is very strange. Who needs to have a high-level inquiry into whether a party took place in your own house? It's not just that he broke the rules that he himself had made. One rule for them, another rule for everyone else. On the very same day that Boris's mates were knocking back the mulled wine, there were people out in the country who were being denied the opportunity of holding the hand of a dying relative because they were keeping the rules. One day this will bring him down. Like at Belshazzar's feast, the writing is on the wall. Mene Tekel Upharsin. The leaked footage of Allegra Stratton. I have to say, Allegra, what a beautiful name that is. There's Charles Ives wrote a song called The Children's Hour, which has the name Allegra in it. The then press secretary to the prime minister chuckling to herself at the ridiculousness of trying to defend the patently indefensible was the final straw. Yes. I'd like to think that Boris Johnson isn't going to survive this, but he has survived. He's a survivor. Time to be positive about the Biden administration, and the New York Post editorial board has happily offered some positive headlines for President Biden. Taliban life improving, more planned fourth, fifth wives. Biden gives hope to Alzheimer's patients everywhere. Meet the 40% who still like Joe. Local man Brandon thrilled by encouragement from passing cars. Who doesn't love a little inflation, am I right? The joys of growing your own food, policing your own home. And, this is... I'd be tempted to say that she was drunk. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I'm tempted to say that she must have been drunk. This is from Felicia Sonmez at the Washington Post. In an emotional video released Wednesday, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, for the first time, publicly delivered the victory speech she had planning to give in November 2016 if she had prevailed over Donald Trump in that year's presidential election. Clinton delivered the speech as part of a masterclass educational video series on the topic of resilience set to launch Thursday. NBC's Today Show featured a roughly 7-minute excerpt of Clinton's remarks on Wednesday. What is going on there? Okay, let's assume that, she was drunk when she recorded the video, but that's just the first step. Then you have to disseminate the video. So there was time, unless she's drunk all the time, there was time for her to say, no, that's a terrible idea. This is going to make me look like a pitiable idiot. And why is the Today Show featuring a roughly 7-minute excerpt from this speech that never was? To what extent are we to blame for the horrible people who rule over us? I'm looking at a picture here of Mayor Beetlejuice of Chicago, who is one of the most hideous creatures I have ever seen. This is from Kevin Downey Jr. at PJ Media. Chicago's woke mayor knows who is to blame for the recent looting of high-end stores. It's the stores, duh. How do we know she believes something so stupid? She said so publicly. I'm disappointed that they're not doing more to take safety and make it a priority. For example, we still have retailers that won't institute plans like having security officers in their stores, making sure that they've got cameras that are actually operational, locking up their merchandise at night, chaining high-end bags. These purses can be something that is attracting a lot of retail theft, organized retail theft units. Amy Jacobson responded, then why pay such high property taxes? Never mind that she and her state's attorney, Kim Fox of Jussie Smollett infamy, all but allow shoplifting without punishment for anyone stealing less than $1,000 worth of swag. Now she's cranky that stores aren't investing more money in security. Okay, so this Mayor Beetlejuice, or Lori Lightfoot, as she's called, she ran against another black woman for mayor. And so the people of Chicago decided to elect the black woman who looks like a demon. So again, to what extent are we to blame for those who rule over us? Yeah, see, drugs aren't legal in Canada, but it's a good thing that they are. This is from Victoria News. BC judge ignores precedent, rejects jail time for addict caught trafficking fentanyl, distinguishes between street-level trafficker supporting an addiction and higher drug dealer. Judge Barbara Flewelling broke with precedent and declined to impose a jail sentence on Tanya Lee Ellis in Campbell River Provincial Court. Ellis pleaded guilty to trafficking in fentanyl and cocaine and fentanyl. The Crown sought a concurrent 3-year sentence on both counts, but the defense argued that a suspended sentence with no or minimal conditions was appropriate. After hearing from an expert witness, Dr. Ryan McNeil, the director of harm reduction research for the program in addiction medicine at the Yale School of Medicine, and a veteran RCMP officer with experience policing the drug scene in Vancouver's downtown east side. The Vancouver police have not policed the drug scene in Vancouver's downtown east side for decades. Okay. And apparently drugs are bad for people. Drugs are bad for people, except when they're not. Rachel Gilmore at Global News. Is the war on drugs over? What war on drugs? Canada is seeing a shift in its approach to drugs, experts say. Walking around the downtown core of any major Canadian city, it's not unusual to see weed dispensaries nestled between restaurants and cafes. It would have been a pipe dream just a decade ago. Pipe dream? Didn't some editor catch that? The federal government introduced legislation Tuesday to repeal mandatory minimum penalties for drug offenses, and Health Canada decided last year to allow some palliative patients to use psilocybin, the chemical compound in magic mushrooms, to relieve end-of-life suffering. Toronto and Vancouver have also called for the decriminalization of the possession of small amounts of drugs. Taking this all together, experts say it's clear we're starting to see a shift in Canada's stance on drugs. I see an acknowledgement that the war on drugs has been a failure, said Dr. Akwazi Owusu-Bampa, an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology at the University of Toronto. In a submission to Health Canada last month, British Columbia detailed its intention to decriminalize the personal possession of up to 4.5 grams of illicit drugs such as heroin, crack, powder cocaine, fentanyl, and methamphetamine. Vancouver has also made a similar submission of its own. And just 1 week ago, Toronto's top doctor said she'd like to see the possession of small amounts of illegal drugs decriminalized in the city. And she's got support from the local police chief. So how's it working out? For about 20 years now, Vancouver and Victoria have taken the position, junkies, what can we do for you? In a related story from Katya Slepian at Victoria News, BC sees deadliest month of illicit drug crisis with 201 fatal overdoses in October. So what's the solution to people dying from illegal drugs? Well, don't make them illegal anymore, and then the problem will go away. I should mention, as many other people have, that the number of people in my province dying from fatal overdoses of illegal drugs is many times more than those dying of COVID-19, which, as we all know, is the biggest threat to the universe, the biggest threat ever known. And let's hear from the Pope. Oh no, before we hear from the Pope, let's hear from my own bishop, who is called Gary Gordon. And there's a picture of him here. And he's wearing a fleece sweater. And he's wearing a pair of crinkled chinos, because that's what bishops are supposed to look like. And it says he's at the pastoral office behind St. Andrew's High School in Victoria. And there's enormous Indian art and face masks behind him, because why? So what's happening with Christmas for Christians and other religious in Victoria? Gordon, who represents the Diocese of Victoria, said he reintroduced a mask requirement in September. But while congregations have been encouraged to get vaccinated, priests don't want to turn away people at the door because of their vaccination status, especially at Christmas. The churches are going to be only allowed 50% capacity. So yes, people are going to be turned away at the door. Quote, our encouragement is for people to do whatever is gonna make them feel most secure and safe and happy and at peace. I mean, peace is the big Christmas message, right? Unquote. This is how bishops talk now. And okay, let's hear from the Pope. Pope Francis says sins of the flesh aren't that serious. This is from Hannah Frischberg at the New York Post. Yes, sins of the flesh are not the most serious, the 84-year-old religious leader said regarding sex outside of marriage. Francis' rankings of the worst wrongdoings followed the resignation of a Paris archbishop who quit over a relationship with a woman earlier this month. However, the 70-year-old French cleric Michel Aupetit denied being intimate with the anonymous female, behavior that would break his promise of celibacy. It was a failing against the sixth commandment, but not a total one. One of small caresses, massage given to his secretary. That's what the accusation is. Francis said, there is a sin, but not there's a sin there, but not the worst kind. The Pope said he accepted Aupetit's resignation, not because he had sinned, but because the rumors were too damaging. He was condemned, but by whom? By public opinion, by gossip. He could no longer govern. I accepted the resignation of Aupetit, not on the altar of truth, but on the altar of hypocrisy. My word, what a creep this man is. I mean, is he ever not snarling? Oh, and more news from New Zealand. And I'm reminded of Peter Simple, the great British satirist, perhaps the greatest ever British satirist, who once wrote of the Church of Jesus Christ, the non-smoker, radical adherents of which believe that those who have never smoked will never die. This is from the BBC. New Zealand to ban cigarettes for future generations. New Zealand will ban the sale of tobacco to its next generation in a bid to eventually phase out smoking. Anyone born after 2008 will not be able to buy cigarettes or tobacco products in their lifetime under a law expected to be enacted next year. We want to make sure young people never start smoking, Health Minister Dr. Aisha Verrill said. The move is part of a sweeping crackdown on smoking announced by New Zealand's health ministry Thursday. Doctors and other health experts in the country have welcomed the world-leading reforms which will reduce access to tobacco and restrict nicotine levels in cigarettes. It will help people quit or switch to less harmful products and make it much less likely that young people get addicted to nicotine, said Professor Janet Hook from the University of Otago. What exactly, why? Why do they want people to quit smoking? Because it costs them money? No, it doesn't. Governments earn a fortune from smoking two ways. From the outrageous taxes that are levied on cigarettes and other tobacco products. And since smokers on average die 5 years before non-smokers, governments save fortunes in both pension costs and health costs. New Zealand is determined to achieve a national goal of reducing its national smoking rate to 5% by 2025, with the aim of eventually eliminating it altogether. At the moment, 13% of New Zealand's adults smoke, with the rate much higher among the indigenous Maori population, where it soars to almost a third. Maoris also suffer a higher rate of disease and death. Yes, not from just smoking. I think Maoris engage in all sorts of behavior harmful to health. You know, perhaps the Maoris could simply claim that smoking tobacco is an integral part of their culture, which in a way you could say that it is. I wonder what the response of the New Zealand government would be then. I mean, we're spoiled for choice in this regard, and my own country is certainly in the running. But New Zealand bids fair to be the most contemptible country on earth. And let's talk about NASA. Remember NASA? You remember they put a man on the moon in 1969? And then they put several other men on the moon. How many were there altogether? Something like about 16 or 17. And then they stopped doing that in the early 1970s. What have they done since that time? Oh, yes, as I like to point out, this was fueled by cigarettes. If you see the pictures of the engineers at the Space Center in Houston, they all seem to be smoking. Ashtrays overflowing. flowing. Darren J. Beatty has a tweet storm on this subject. Apollo program cost approximately $25 billion, roughly $200 billion in today's money. That was for everything. The R&D, the government contracts, the labor, the promotion, the budget for all parts of a decade-long program. And that included the cost of inventing from scratch all new space technology that had never been developed or tested before in human history. We're talking rocket engines, command modules, lunar landers, computer equipment, all the incredible component parts. Within each broad category, e.g. rocket engines, you have the incredible volume of subcategories, e.g. multiple rockets for different stages of launch, plus ascent engines versus descent engines. SLS, short for Space Launch System, has already cost $22 billion after 10 years in development and still has not gotten off the ground. This is just one small fraction of the mission. No lunar lander, no spacesuits, no moon buggies, none of the incredible volume of other separate mission aspects, and it has single-handedly cost more than 10% of the entire Apollo budget with inflation adjustment. And that's just cost to date. It hasn't even had a single successful test yet. It could cost $50 billion or $100 billion and never even launch. It gets worse. We've already spent billions trying to get to the moon in the failed Constellation program launched by Bush before Obama canceled it. Bush said we'd be on the moon by 2020. None of the parts of the Artemis program are done or even remotely close to being done. We have no rocket ship, we have no rocket engine, we have no lunar lander, we have no spacesuits, nothing. Apollo's peak spending year was 1966, 3 years before the first moon launch, ostensibly because the research and development was done by then. Reality is Congress and President Johnson lost faith in NASA and threatened its budget. We've done it before, and presumably the hard part in the rearview mirror. If it cost $200 billion in the 1960s, it should cost a tiny fraction to replicate in 2021. The cost efficiencies of more advanced technology should offset the cost of inflation. Beatty went on to say that the private initiatives, Elon Musk et al., are not doing very well either. Apparently, the expertise, which led to the Saturn V rocket, apparently that's gone now. Apparently, we don't have people who can design rockets as well as they were designed in the 1960s, which is pretty sad when you think about it. Wouldn't you say? It seems sad to me. I mean, it's one thing to say that it's wasted money to go to the moon or go to Mars. But it's another, oh, yeah, sure, we're going to do that again, only we can't. And we're going to spend 10 years designing a new spacesuit because there are women astronauts. Now, yes, as I've said previously, I don't think that women in space is a good idea. Men tend to freak out after not very long in space. And it seems to be worse for women. I'm going to go to Theater Thursday in just a few minutes. Let's go to the chat. Musk is a con man, says Old Major. I see an incredible number of Teslas in Victoria. I'm really surprised at how many there are. British American says, idiocracy now. Dennis Dale, hello, says, we're all out of brilliant black women's working from the shadows, I guess. Halper says the shuttle was supposed to make space travel as routine as a trip to Hawaii. Crazy Frog Football Analysis says the movie Alien was a metaphor for the destructive nature of females in the universe. Maybe. One thing about Alien, that Sigourney Weaver, she's the, kick-ass, tough female hero. And then, of course, we're told, wow, a science fiction movie hero who's a woman? That's never been done before. When did Alien come out? But she is thrust into this position because the men are simply not fit for purpose. That the captain, he just wants to listen to Mozart in his cabin and doesn't want to, do any deciding because, deciding is sometimes hard. Okay. Might as well have called this shuttle the Space Jitney, taking bold men into space. The Chicoms backed up a U-Haul full of cash. Beep, beep. To Ardern's garage door, says British American. The shuttle program was a gigantic waste, says Dr. Deadname, who adds half of NASA does legitimate science, the unmanned probes, space telescopes, and observatories. The other half, the man-signed, has been moribund since Skylab. They just put peanut butter in Jacinda's mouth and overdub her voice. Nice horse reference there. Cigarettes and alcohol, says Dennis Dale. Yeah, it seems that a lot of these astronauts were hard drinkers. $17 a pack in New York City, says Chug against 666. There has to be bootleg cigarettes being sold. Dennis Dale says BLM's statement backing Jacqui unconditionally is something else. There was another way to approach this, which was we can all see that Jacqui's obviously going through a thing, that he's had some problems. Let's just hope that he gets the help that he needs, instead of, proclaiming to the world that a transparently bogus stunt was real. Shogokin 666 says, I understand Bergoglio floats with the zeitgeist. I read he was conservative at home when it was in vogue to be a conservative. Has Ardern explained her sudden meteoric rise in net worth? Yes, I don't know whether you saw the clip with the Kennedy Center honorees. So Joe Biden is speaking about the list of people who were given Kennedy Center honors last year, and he read out several names, and then he said meteor. He said meteor. Was he thinking perhaps that someone on this list was nicknamed the Meteor or something that's like a meteor, or who knows? Who knows? Okay. Lightfoot deserves her own Calvin Klein billboard. I don't really want to see the rest of her. Do you remember when she dressed when she was LARPing as a superhero? Do you remember she dressed up in a superhero outfit? Do you remember that? Was there ever an English queen named Allegra? Not to the best of my knowledge. Not to the best of my knowledge. So I'm going to go to the Theater Thursday. I just wanted to look something up here. Just take a second here. Talk amongst yourselves and see whether I can. I just need to look up some words here. Okay. Yes, between the dark and the daylight, when the night is beginning to lower, comes a pause in the day's occupations that is known as children's hour. I hear in the chamber above me the patter of little feet, the sound of a door that is opened, and voices soft and sweet. From my study, I see in the lamplight, descending the broad hall stair, grave Alice and laughing Allegra and Edith with golden hair. It's a lovely little poem, and a lovely song by Charles Ives. I have a CD with the Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau's rendition of it. So just let me open up some tabs here for my discussion of Theater Thursday. This is a movie that came out in 1960 called Capo. There seems to be a controversy about the origin of the word capo. Some people say it comes from the Italian boss. Others say that it's a corruption of a corporal, And there are even other explanations. But what a capo is a prison friendly who has been given powers over the other prisoners in order to keep them in line. And the capo system was institutionalized in German concentration camps and death camps during World War II. And capo is a fictionalized version of just such an arrangement. Gillo Pontecorvo was born in 1919 and he died in 2006. He is best known for his semi-documentary film, The Battle of Algiers, which came out in 1966, which is about the breaking of the general strike in Algiers by the use of torture by the French army. Pontecorvo was a Jew himself, and he fled Italy in the 1930s. And he was a communist, formally so, and you can see this reflected in Capo. He fought in the resistance, and he said, "I'm not an out-and-out revolutionary. I'm merely a man of the left, like a lot of Italian Jews." He made the Battle of Algiers was widely acclaimed, and rightfully so. And he made other films, such as Burn from 1969, which stars Marlon Brando. And Marlon Brando was probably in more bad movies than any other movie star in the 1960s and 70s. Well, he was in The Godfather, of course. But, and a lot of these movies were bad because Marlon Brando starred in them. He made a film called Ogro in 1979, which stars the great actor John Maria Volante. But let's talk about Capo. And again, I need to warn you that despite what the final act of the film, which is a more traditional, and rousing, this is one of the grimmest movies that I have ever seen. Grimmer than the Polish film Canal about the Warsaw Uprising. Perhaps. It stars Susan Strasberg. And Susan Strasberg's father was Lee Strasberg, the famous acting teacher. Method, yes, he was the man behind Method. Now, Strasberg had a movie career of his own. He was in the second Godfather movie, playing a character, a Jewish gangster based on Meyer Lansky. He's very good in that. And then he started to get other roles. But his daughter, I don't know that she ever, that her early promise, she fulfilled her early promise. She appeared in a lot of exploitation films in the 1960s. Scream of Fear. No, that's not let's see. Oh, yes, The Trip from 1967, which is a Roger Corman film written by Jack Nicholson, and it Bruce Dern playing one of his first crazed or bemused movie roles. Also, Psych Out from 1968 that Jack Nicholson stars in, along with Dean Stockwell and, guess what, Bruce Dern, featuring the music of The Seeds and the Strawberry Alarm Clock. Susan Strasberg did a lot of TV work. She's really remarkable in this film. the camera spends a lot of time on her face. And she has a very expressive face. And we see the changes in her expressed by her face. At the beginning, shock and terror, and then we see her face hardening and becoming harder and harder as she's crushed. She submits to the system, and then we see a softening again near the end of the movie. This movie starts in media res, which I've said before is a technique which I love. There's no exposition in this film at all. I mean, the first hour or so, I mean, it could be, you might think it's a documentary. I mean, that's how it's shot. So we are introduced to a 14-year-old Jewish girl named Edith, and we see her having a harpsichord lesson. And the lesson is finished, and she leaves. And then her teacher gets a phone call, and the phone call is not explained, but I think it's easy enough to work out that someone is calling in an attempt to warn her. And so she is skipping along home, and just as when she's right at her apartment, she sees a truck, which people are being thrown into the truck. We've already seen that Edith wears the yellow star on her chest, on her jacket. And she sees her mother and father being thrown into a truck to be sent to a concentration or death camp. And she runs screaming up to it in an attempt to stop this. It's a futile attempt, of course, and other people are remonstrating with her that this is foolish. Don't do it. Of course, she gets grabbed and thrown into the truck as well. And she ends up in a camp, and then the sorting is done. These people are destined for labor camps. So who are the people that are going to be useful at work, and who are the people who are going to be useless? Well, the old and the infirm and the young are useless, and so they are killed immediately. There is a really, I should mention the use of editing in this film, particularly in the beginning. That Roberto Cinquini and Inhila Michele are responsible for this. It does such a good job at showing the absolute chaos of the situation in the streets when Edith and her parents are swept up, and then the chaos in the camps, and just the shock that experienced by everyone. How can this be happening? How is this happening to me? What's going to happen to me? Am I going to die? And Edith does not want to die. She says so. And so trying to escape, well, she can't escape. It's impossible from the camp. And she is helped by a kindly physician, the camp physician, who is a political prisoner. And he explains that there are three types of prisoners in the camp. There are the political prisoners like him. There are criminal prisoners, and then there are Jews. And it is best to be a criminal prisoner, then a political. Next best, and at the bottom are the Jews. So he has a scheme to save her. He checks in on his patients, and a female patient has died. He strips her of the prison garb and tells Edith that she must take off her clothes. No, all of your clothes. Put these on. And of course, she is horrified by the thought of donning this filthy clothing, which has been taken off a corpse. But she does. And this is the beginning of her degradation. That there is a battle going on amongst the female prisoners of how to react to this relentless degradation to which they are exposed. And Emmanuel Riva, who is outstanding in this film, plays a woman called Therese, who is determined that she is not going to be broken by the system, that there is something that they cannot take from us, which is our dignity. And this film is very cruel to her. That we learn of the existence of the capos very quickly. Now, Edith, who has assumed the identity of a thief called Nicole, she has to make a choice as to which route is she going to go. Is she going to save her skin at any cost, or is she going to show resistance, or is she going to try to save her self-respect, her dignity? Well, she chooses to save her own skin. Not that anyone can blame her. All sorts of accommodations are made. Therese, Emmanuel Riva's character, speaks fluent German, so she gets some privileges by working as a translator. But the best job is to be a capo. Not only does one get better food and better clothing, and is able to grow out one's hair, which is important to women, or to most women, you also get to bully your fellow prisoners. And I suppose in this externalization of the inner self-loathing that we see here. And as mentioned previously, Edith's character becomes harder and harder. And eventually we see that Therese is, well, she's broken. And in one scene, which is terrible to watch, Therese has somehow managed to get a hold of a potato, which she is cooking in a sort of way by putting it at the top of a stove, a wood-burning stove. And when her back is turned, Edith shows up and steals the potato. And Therese remonstrates with her hysterically. And Edith's position is, well, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? We see a number of cat fights in this film. They are normally broken up by the other prisoners. Therese breaks finally and is subsumed. There is a woman, a laborer in the factory, in the camp, and she is clearly a communist, and she is determined to sabotage the workings of the factory. She is caught, and we see her on a stool with a sign in German around her on her chest, saying that this is the fate of all of the fiends, who work against the Reich. And so, as SS commandant speaks in German, and it's Therese's job to translate. And he again, we are keeping you. The Reich is keeping you alive, and so you must work. And if you don't work, or if you attempt to sabotage us, this is what's going to happen. And poor Therese breaks down, and she can't continue. So she's given, I think, 15 days in solitary and half rations for 3 months, which is the end of her. She comes back, and she's reduced to stealing food herself, and she decides to throw herself at the electrified fence and dies that way. We see another one of the prisoners, this tough woman who had taken the position that you have to do what you have to do in order to survive, and it mocked Therese. We see her shot to death with a machine gun because she's being, going to be herded off to be gassed, and she decides, well, I might as well die here. There's nothing I can do to save myself. And she delivers a wonderful volley of profane insults at a German officer. Edith has had her virginity taken by an SS officer, which she volunteers for because better treatment. She becomes sort of a mascot of the SS men, of the officers. And she gets to grow her hair out, and she gets better clothing, and she gets decent boots. Of course, we had seen her earlier stripping the filthy socks off a just killed woman. That's very disturbing to watch. And she gets the company of a cat named Faust. She has some interesting discussions with a SS soldier called Karl, who has lost a hand in the war. And so he's been, devolved to this kind of duty, and he wants to get back to the front. And he says that he's not interested in love. He's just interested in his country. And there's no attempt in this movie to make the Germans, I don't know, more evil than they need to be, which is a lot. I mean, they're not cackling or twisting mustaches or anything like that. There is a group, rather large group of Russian prisoners of war who are delivered to the camp as forced labor. And it's at this point that the movie changes rather radically, that it becomes a sort of paean to the virtues of the Red Army and the virtues of communism. And there is a handsome soldier named Sasha, played by Laurent Tarzieff, who falls in love with Edith, despite the fact that she almost killed him after one of the female prisoners had attempted to smuggle a letter out. She blames this on him, and he is nearly beaten to death. And then he is tortured by being forced to stand at attention a few inches away from the electrified fence. And he's informed that if he steps out of this little box, then he will be shot with a machine gun by the sentry who is watching him the whole time. And the sentry teases him. Oh, look, here's a cigarette. He lights it, throws it. I suppose it lands a few feet from him. Well, come on, don't you like smoking? I promise. I won't do anything. Well, Sasha is not stupid enough to fall for that. He survives the evening, and of course, it's right back to work at the beginning of the workday, and he collapses several times, which he gets kicked and the like. As I said, Pontecorvo was a communist, and golly, there's such a great bunch of guys these soldiers of the Red Army are. No, they were savage brutes for the most part. They were a vast rape machine, moving thousands of miles from east to west. And despite all that Sasha says about the wonderful world that awaits him and presumably Edith after the war, Stalin and his government took the view that Russian POWs had been tainted by their exposure to the enemy, to the fascists, and it was not particularly good for them after the end of the war. Edith is drawn into a plot, an escape plot, and people have used the word melodrama to describe what results. You could say that. I would say it is still greatly affecting nonetheless. Edith has to make a decision as to whether she is going to become a martyr, whether she is going to sacrifice herself for the greater good, which she does. And she dies in the arms of Sasha. And right before she dies, she recites, parts of the Shema Yisrael, which you can find in the Old Testament in Deuteronomy 6:4. Begins, "Hear, O Israel." It's a very moving scene, I must say. And this movie is one of the most overwhelming movies I have ever seen. And I highly recommend it. But again, with the caveat that it is exceedingly grim. Bernard-Henri Lévy, the French intellectual, the man who Michel Houellebecq once described as the stupidest man in France, had a problem with Capo. It's a very strange essay in the Wall Street Journal called "Hollywood's Nazi Revisionism. Doesn't the truth here make a good enough story?" So he's railing against Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards and Martin Scorsese's Shutter Island. I don't really understand his argument. I don't get it, but okay. So shall we just let pass the piles of candy-colored Photoshop cadavers in Shutter Island that look like they just popped out of a Jeff Koons composition? And should we allow these doctored, computerized images of the Holocaust to banalize, excellent English there, the most horrible, incomparable event of human history? Well, he rather missed the point of Shutter Island, that the whole thing it's supposed to be a mind-bending experience because it's based on a falsehood. But anyway, Lévy writes, the Italian filmmaker Gillo Pontecorvo earned the deepest contempt of French director Jacques Rivette in an article in Cahiers du Cinéma nearly 50 years ago for a scarcely more insistent shot in the 1959 film Capo. The shot was one of a raised hand of actress Emmanuelle Riva, her character Thérèse, electrocuted on the barbed wire of the concentration camp from which she was trying to escape. The criticism hung over Pontecorvo until his dying day. He was ostracized, almost cursed, for a shot, just one. Is this the same Pontecorvo whose Battle of Algiers came out, 6 years later to universal acclaim? I suppose the argument could be made that the shot is kitsch. I mean, I didn't find it so. I mean, when people lunge out at the wire and they're electrocuted, their arms are likely to be in that position. But again, I don't. French intellectuals are a mystery to me. This movie is available from Criterion in a bare bones edition. The print is really quite good. This is a movie which really emphasizes chiaroscuro, and you need a good print to bring that home. The photography is exceedingly intense, very, very full of brightness. And again, this comes through in the print. So those are my thoughts on Capo. Halper says, Lévy is a coiffed and manicured intellectual monk. Chokin 666, it's as much kitsch as the Frank Capra photo of the Spanish soldier being shot. Yes, and that comparison has been made. The Hells Angels movie with Nicholson is entertaining, says Chokin 666. Despite the impression that I might have given, both of those movies with Susan Strasberg from the late 1960s, a very strange period in Hollywood indeed. The Trip and Psych Out, I find them enormously enjoyable. Boy, you're never going to see movies like that again. But maybe we will. Every so often, Hollywood comes across something that it doesn't understand, but it makes movies about this phenomenon anyway, often with hilarious results. Isn't that Tarantino film torture porn? Says Anwar. Yes, it is torture porn. Just the movie, it just sickened me beyond measure. Quachalango, hello, says missed last couple of shows in real time, snuck into the theater without paying at the box office for this one. Always find OT interesting on some of the Thursdays. Chat goes quiet for 15 minutes. She was also in Roller Coaster, says Anwar. Ah, well, there's the Susan Strasberg Sparks connection. My Trail of Disgrace said, I found Shutter Island really tedious. Not sure if it's Scorsese's worst, but it's clunky and like Inception, bogged down by its hyper narrativism. Inception, eh? I really don't like that movie. This is not how dreams work, okay? Because there is an element of, there's a real arbitrary element in dreams, that so much of what happens in dreams is just really stupid, or you get parts of the dream which are really stupid. It's like Pee Wee Herman says in Pee Wee's Big Adventure, talking about a dream, and then there's a snake wearing a necktie, things like that, Also, I have no idea what's going on in this movie, Inception. And there is a battle in the snow between rival groups wearing white clothing, so you don't know who anyone is. And this goes on for something like 20 minutes. The wiki on Kitsch shocked me, to say the least. Chat will have to see it to believe, says Oscar Atoe. Okay, I haven't checked that out, but I will. Do we have anything else here? The capo regimes, Tessio, that fat Clemenza, says Halper. Missing. No, that was Costa Gravis who did Missing. In our lifetime, we will see a space shuttle. Okay, I'm not going to repeat that. Okay. I dream of my late mom almost every night. I'm rather... A couple of days ago, I had my first dream about living in this hotel. And I don't know whether this is common to other people's dreams. I dream about Vancouver at least once a week. I spent most of my life there. And this is where my formative memories come from, Vancouver. And I'm in like Point Grey, or I'm on Granville Street, or I'm on, Broadway Street near Granville. These places I know very well, right? And I'm walking down the street, but there are significant differences that for some reason, things which shouldn't be there are there. In the dream I have about Vancouver, this is a dream I have over and over again. I always go to a magazine store and buy copies of Private Eye and The Spectator, and I always seem to end up at a discount book place. The books which have been withdrawn. Oh, and look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this. Yeah, but I dreamed about this hotel. And so I'm in the lobby and I walk up the stairs to the second floor and I can't find my room because my room number doesn't exist. And I tried this several times, and the configuration of the second floor has been radically changed for some reason in this dream. And I go downstairs and I said, look, could you help me out? I'm in room, and I name my room number. And okay, and I can't find it. I mean, it sounds silly, but I can't find it. Maybe you can help me. So this person says, sure, I'll do that. So we go upstairs and it's the same thing. Wow, this is really a mystery, isn't it? It's so stupid. Okay. So sounds like Kitsilano, many bookstores there, says Dan. There used to be, I used to buy a lot of books, remaindered books, and Vancouver was once a great city for remaindered books. Of course, that's when there were things called bookstores that weren't chapters, I wasn't expecting Milan Kundera's segment in that wiki on Kitsch, says Oscar Toe. I have a Milan Kundera story for you. I knew a German department professor at the University of BC. I knew her pretty well, and I knew her husband, who was also a professor. Her name was Markita Götz-Stankiewicz, and she had connections to the literary world. And, before the go into her story, here's a story about Harold Pinter and Antonia Fraser, or Lady Magnesia Freelove, as Private Eye called her. And Professor Götz-Stankiewicz told me this story. For some reason, they decided to get married at City Hall in Berlin. And so there was a reception put on, and wine was provided, sparkling wine. And Lady Antonia was aghast that it was not champagne. It was German sparkling wine. And one of the German functionaries said, but this is what we give. This is what the President of the Republic drinks. Well, Lady Antonia was slightly mollified by that. And she was given a glass, which she sipped, put down, and then said derisively, Sekt, which is hilarious to me. But anyway, Professor Götz-Stankiewicz knew Milan Kundera's translator, whose translations were acclaimed, universally acclaimed. And she told me that Kundera had referred to the translations of this man as variations on my theme. So there's our literary talk for today. So I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, and it's the book club, and I'm going to be talking about a novel by Lady Teresa Waugh called Waterloo, Waterloo, which is an excellent book, and it's largely about what people think about other people, which is not particularly complimentary. Thank you all for tuning in. If you would like to support this live stream with a donation, which I could really use to get me out of this place, please. My PayPal account is Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you're in Canada, donations may be made to the live stream directly at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.